Spicy workers. What was the saddest request you have ever received? Story 1. I'm gay, just to set the stage. Though I'm much more comfortable in my skin and with my spiciness now. Just check my username. Years ago, I was a self-esteem mess. I was young, gay, hairy, fat, and felt as though no other gay man on earth would want me. I tried to get dates, only to have guy after guy ghost me when he realized I didn't look like an underwear model. Then I met Troy online. He was a spicy worker and very open about it. He was beautiful, kind, and instantly I wanted him. I hadn't had spicy time with another man in almost 3 years, so I was pretty desperate for some action. I negotiated the fee with Troy, booked him for the night, about 4 hours, and sent him my address. When he arrived, he was even more beautiful than his pictures. I wanted to do him right then and there, but something happened when he took his clothes off. He was standing in my bedroom, naked and ready to party, so to speak, and something in me snapped. I realized that the only way I had to get a hot guy like that to have spicy time with me was to pay him. I sat down on my bed and started to cry. The body image issues? I was now even more self-conscious to get naked in front of Troy, being that he was practically Adonis in my eyes. The lack of a love life, the self-esteem, the depression, it all coalesced into a miasma of torment and pain. Troy, to his credit, didn't question my sudden change. Instead, he gently undressed me and then laid beside me in bed, his head on my chest and his leg resting on top of mine. For almost an hour, he told me about his life, asked about mine, and even sounded genuinely excited to hear about my master's thesis topic. Whether he meant it or was just a good actor, I'll never know. When his time was up, the time I pre-booked, he didn't leave. Instead, he asked if he could spend the night. We stayed cuddled up like that and talked until dawn. Before he finally did leave, he did give me manual spiciness, but it didn't feel as though I paid, though I did. This felt more like it was a friend making me feel good, not someone who was obligated for that. Troy, wherever you are, thank you for being so sweet. This story was better than I could have imagined to start out with. It seems this person wasn't really mentally prepared for this incident, even though he thought he was. But Troy was so unbelievably nice to this person. It was sad, but there was no judgment. Troy went above and beyond. I'm glad this person is more comfortable about himself now. Story 2. Back when I worked in a dungeon, while there was no penetrative spicy time or anything that would be classified as spicy, no exchange of fluids, etc., still classified as spicy work though. One client came in. He was married. All he wanted was for me to put on a wig that matched his wife's hair, wear a certain shade of Louboutin lipstick that he brought me and his wife wore, and Dior perfume that he also bought and his wife also wore, and then have me compliment him while he told me about his day. He was a client up until his divorce and remarriage. Edit. To answer a few questions. No, it wasn't his wife's lipstick. It was a new lipstick in her brand and shade. And no, I didn't pay for it myself, as it's $120 lipstick. I have my own cosmetics, but for special requests, they had to bring me unopened cosmetics, for safety reasons. The same applies for the perfume. I go fragrance-free unless given a requested fragrance. Same rules with the perfume, for safety reasons. It has to be an unopened package. They can take the products back after a session, but the next session they would have to bring me a new unopened package. So most let me keep them for a future session. Ooh, this one is really sad. But in a way there's a happy ending. He seemed to break out of his disillusion and actually face reality. Actually broke it off with this woman. In a way I'm glad it worked out. Story 3. Not a spicy worker, dancer, and not the craziest story, but had a guy ask me to hit him with his belt, hard as hell, my shoes, stomp on his genitals, and completely berate him. He got crazy intense each time I would, too. His reaction actually scared me sometimes, because he would get in my face with hella intensity, and I remember thinking, this dude knocked me out. He was big. I did it, got paid nicely, and I would love to say I was all about it, but I wasn't. It's just not my thing at all. Edit. If being a stripper qualifies me as being a spicy worker and I can put my story on here, then good. Was trying to avoid the opposite backlash, actually. Giving my story as a stripper and someone being like, you're not a spicy worker, it doesn't count. I don't know, I'm just trying to follow the rules of the post. Don't be mad at me. Yeah, I think people have this assumption that all spicy workers are down for anything the client wants. They don't realize that this person is a freelancer. They can easily turn down anything they want. I think people need to realize that specialization exists, even in the spicy realm. Story 4. I have known a lot of spicy workers, and variations on this often come up when chatting. Mentioned a few already about people just wanting to be held. Happens a lot. It's not viewed as sad at all times. There are dozens of stories I've heard that were sad in different ways, but the two that stand out are about a fairly young Australian guy who got his new friend for the evening back to his room, and when she was checking him in the shower, she sees his junk was a disaster zone. She said it was all a swollen lump. He did not want spicy time. He wanted her to push pencils down his man tube. She refused to even touch him, and he started crying. The other story I remember is about a middle-aged European guy who, when he got someone back to his room, would make phone calls during spicy time. He would call his wife and kids and talk while in the act. He would call at weird times and say he couldn't sleep and he wanted to hear their voices. He couldn't do anything until he made a call and started acting like a good husband and father. By the way, I was told this story by more than one person. He did it a lot. Story 5. I received a message from a submissive man asking me to make him my slave. It's not an outlandish request when you're a spicy worker involved with kink, but I don't consider myself dominant at all, so I politely declined the request. He replied and tried to bribe me with a tribute, expensive gifts, and it eventually escalated with him saying he'd take his life for me. This man was not a regular or customer I had interacted with before. It caught me off guard. I'd like to think it was just some desperate cry for attention and fulfilling a mistress-slave fantasy, but it really made me uncomfortable. Also, a lot of submissive men who message random women to be their mistress usually have no concern for safety or sanity during scenes. So even if I was interested in taking on that role, it would not have been worth the money or stress. Story 6. Not me, but a friend of mine. This happened recently, too. We were out drinking and decided to call 2 local spicy workers, and also got a hotel for ourselves with 2 queen beds. They came knocking on the door shortly after. It was 2 really young and nice-looking girls in their 20s, both blonde. Somehow, his spicy worker, or should I say partner, looked a lot like his ex-wife. His ex-wife cheated on him while we were deployed overseas. We're both in the army. He loved her really much, and also because of the alcohol, I guess. He hugged that girl for a long time while he cried. I felt bad for him. He was saying, "I loved you so much. Why did you do that to me?" etc. He held her in his arms and kept crying and kissing her forehead. He fell asleep after a while. I told her that I'm sorry that my buddy got emotional and explained to her the situation. She said it's okay and she would sleep next to him the whole night and that we only need to pay for the 2-hour fee instead of overnight. The next day, my buddy tipped her pretty good and told her to take care of herself. Not gonna lie, I was a stereotypical type when it comes to spicy workers, but she really changed my view about it. There's a lot of talk about being able to separate the act from the emotions. This sounds like one of those instances where that was simply not true. Maybe he would have been able to handle himself if the spicy worker looked like someone else, but hopefully this showed that he needed to get some professional help that he needs, maybe some therapy. Story 7. A guy with severe mobility issues had a house fire that burned his spine and disabled him intellectually, like stroke-type brain damage, as well as physically, and bouncers had to help him go to the bathroom. Younger than my father. He wanted conversation because he lost his family in the fire and was just waiting to die, basically, as his hands were scarred and useless. He couldn't work or take up hobbies as his memory and brain function were almost impaired. He would start out okay, but start crying and bawling under the absolute burden he knows he is now to society, as he was a successful family man. He always stunk bad, and rarely had more than a couple of dollars. I always tried talking to him, but he would get upset that he couldn't just stay and talk longer. Have to make money, too, and scrounging as is. But don't think he understood where he was sometimes until his memory reset and he recalled. He never drank, but never remembered spending his money either. It was like a goldfish. It was heartbreaking. Story 8. I had a client who was quite wealthy. Our first date went really well, and afterwards we sent each other some memes because they were from one of the topics we've talked about. For 2 months, he booked me every single week for an overnight date, 2,000 euros per date. He also bought me gifts and books he knew I'd enjoy. Anyway, after 6 dates, he wanted to gift me a beautiful ring and told me he loves me. I was really uncomfortable and told him that while I do enjoy his company, it's still nothing serious and basically just business surprise for both of us. He started crying and told me about how I look and act like his ex-fiancée who unalived herself, and he wanted to make himself and me happy. When I told him that I can't and won't replace his dead girlfriend, he cried again and offered me even more money to pretend being her. I didn't accept his offer, went home, and blocked his number. Story 9. I don't know about sad, but I'm a go-go dancer. And I have, well before Corona, a guy who pays me to choke and slap him, like as hard as I can. I left a mark. Another guy likes dancers to pee in an empty beer bottle and bring it to him. He will literally start chugging it before you even walk away. It's so disgusting. I refuse to touch him or do a dance with him, but I'll pee in a bottle for $40. One of the saddest, I guess, is a guy who used to give me $400 to $500 every night he would come, and not sad because of anything he asked me to do, but because he was a 50-year-old with a wife and no kids who was secretly gay. He would come to the bar and pay me $500 just to sit with him and talk. He was pretty quiet, and he barely even touched me. Yeah, that is sad. A lot of these stories are people hiding what other people won't accept, and these are things that probably should be accepted by people. Not on a regular basis, but they're not treading any moral ground here. If this person seems stuck in not being able to say he's gay in this day and age, that's pretty harsh. Story 10. I had spicy time with a 23-year-old guy who was younger than me by 3 years, and his wish was to have spicy time as his last dying wish. He wanted me to make him feel loved, as if he found the right person for him. He never found anyone in his life that could make him feel better, so I had to stand up for him. Man, he was a good guy, and yet he had cancer. I had a friend in a similar situation. He lost his virginity at the age of 19, not to a spicy worker, but to a lady he knew, roughly his age. Him and all of our friends hung out. He was the one that organized us to hang out once more. He told me about his plans, and I was too naive to know what to do. A few weeks later, he took his own life. That was 4 or 5 years ago. I still blame myself for it occasionally. Nicest guy you'd ever meet. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video, and have a wonderful day. Story 11. This is a different kind of interaction of similar tone, and I had a phone spicy time client. It became clear after a few calls that I think his only interactions were online and involved giving money for attention back. I don't know if he had the means to keep this up or not, but he got very weird around the 5th call. Upset I wasn't online as much to talk. Wanted to talk all throughout the day, and when he couldn't afford it, would try to haggle me lower in price. I told him that this amount isn't healthy for the mind and he should seek therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD and had wonderful therapy that changed my life around. He got upset at me and blocked me. 2 days later, I wake up to text messages asking me to take him back. He sent me photos of the front and back of all his credit cards to prove he was serious. I felt so bad for him. Story 12. Like a few replies in this thread, I've done my fair share of counseling with guys who are in relationships or marriages that they absolutely hate but can't leave for some reason. I do my best to listen, but tried to avoid giving out advice. Always needed to be careful giving advice to guys who I just had spicy time with. Heard stories of spicy workers who had done that, and the guy is taken as an invitation to leave their wife for the spicy worker. Saddest for me was the guy who was incredibly excited at the thought of bringing me some of his wife's clothes to wear for our next session. She was very much alive. I don't know what the thrill was, but it wasn't for me. Avoided his calls after that. I guess there was a conversation with the wife. Husband wants something from the wife that the wife doesn't want to give. There's some give and take here that isn't happening. There doesn't seem to be a compromise. It's very tricky in these kind of situations. This guy really wants what he wants and is doing what he can to make it that way. I don't know how I feel about that. Story 13. I don't know if this counts, but I sell foot picks, and I used to have this one customer who was the nicest guy ever. He was pretty young, only like a couple of years older than me. I'm 20, and overall just super guilty about his kink. He would always pay me really well and was overly polite. He would pay me extra and for my pedicures, and was never demanding about anything, which is super rare. We would have long conversations where I would try to convince him that liking feet was a mild kink and nothing to worry about. He never really got over the guilt, though. He came from an extremely Catholic family, so he was super repressed. Overall, nicest customer or guy I've ever met. Would shower me in compliments, and our relationship honestly just felt like a friendship. Story 14. Not me, but a friend who cams. A guy DM'd her and asked her for a 30-minute video call. She said yes, and they went on Discord. But instead of anything spicy, the guy just asked how her day was and continued to have an honest conversation for an hour. When he said he had to go, he asked how much he owed her, and she refused any payment. Apparently, this happens very often, and it's kind of depressing because these people are really nice but are often overweight. Story 15. Not me, but a story told to me from a girl I know who used to be a spicy worker. She had a regular client who'd come in every week and just wanted to talk, be held, or innocent things like that. Never wanted anything spicy. According to her, this wasn't that unusual. Some guys felt guilty about going to a brothel or just wanted fetishes satisfied. But she said this dude was different. From what she pieced together, he had an extremely unhappy home life. It seemed the only happiness he had in life was the hour he spent with this girl. She said one time he booked an appointment but never showed up, and they never heard from him again. I think I've heard about places in Japan that are more to this situation. Nothing spicy takes place, but they just cuddle. There's rates for looking into each other's eyes or spooning or something like that. It's a little sad. Story 16. Not my story, but someone else's that somehow stuck with me. Owner of a spicy service who shared a story of a guy who apparently was from a wealthy family, but as a child hardly ever saw his parents. He was raised by an au pair or nanny with beautiful long hair, which he always combed for her as a kid. Into puberty, he had got aroused from combing it. She noticed and gave him his first spicy experience. Since then, the man always requested girls with long hair and only wanted to comb it and then get manual spiciness. Kinda sad thinking about all the parental love he missed and trying to compensate like this. Story 17. I dated a working dominatrix for a couple of years, and one of her regular customers would lock himself in the bathroom and cry while she pleaded with him to come out. Same routine every time. She'd go to his house, knock on the door, he'd open it, run to the bathroom, lock the door, and start crying. When the hour was up, he'd come out, pay her, say thank you very much, and schedule next week's appointment. Always reminded me of the Looney Tunes cartoon with the sheepdog and coyote stamping their time cards before and after a busy day of trying to unalive each other. Story 18. Usually, the requests themselves aren't sad. It's the conversations that I have with them. I had a guy buy panties and videos from me and just spoil me. He'd randomly send me Amazon gift cards and money, and at one point even bought me a ring. We also just talked a lot in a non-spicy way. I eventually found out that he was in an unhappy marriage and trying to get the connection that he wasn't getting from his wife. I don't know if he spoiled me because he wanted the feeling of treating a woman, or if he was trying to buy my affections. Ultimately, he told me that he talked with his wife and that they were getting a divorce, and thanked me for the role that I unintentionally played in that. Ooh, that kinda hits hard. I don't know if I'd want to be thanked for breaking up a relationship, even though it might be amicable. Even if they ended up for the better, I don't know how I'd feel about that. How do you think you'd feel? Story 19. Not one myself, but I know a few. The most interesting thing to me is that they're not all 22-year-old hotties. There are some mature ladies at brothels in Nevada who have regular clients who want NSA or massages, and usually a lot of talking or easy companionship. It's sad to me that the huge number of people who are just plain lonely for touch and time. Story 20. I remember when I was a curious kid seeing HBO's Cat House the series and thinking, oh man, that's basically corn. And watching an episode because, well, you're a kid assuming it will be spicy, most definitely not spicy. The episode watched was some guy paying to just lay down and be held by one of the workers. They spooned, talked, and he gave her a foot massage. Made me feel really bad, even at 13. Story 21. I don't know why, but I was honestly expecting to read some story about a guy who just lost his wife and didn't want to be alone for a night. Instead, the first thing I see is, guy cried because spicy worker didn't want to shove pencils into his man tube. Man, people are freaky deaky. Yep, it looks like expectations are being let down all over the place. People want to pay for a straightforward experience, but people aren't straightforward. People are complex and want their needs met, and you might not just understand how they want their needs met, like ever understand. Story 22. This was a long time ago, but for an hour of his 90-minute session, he just sat there and talked about his ex-wife who hated him. He asked me if he should stop financially supporting his stepson because he wouldn't stop smoking lettuce in the house, then read me some poetry he wrote about his ex-wife. I never saw him again, but he emailed me more of his poetry afterwards. Story 23. Since this sounds like a good topic, did any of you notice an increased demand of your service due to lockdowns and the pandemic? Especially cam girls, since most other interactions would be rather unhealthy and defy the idea of the lockdown. Story 24. A rabbi during our session spent most of his time questioning his faith, asking me for my opinion on the proof of God. I don't believe in God. I told him that he needs to be brave and not practice something he doesn't believe in. He would agree, get manual spicy time, put on his religious clothes, and schedule another appointment where the exact same scenario played out. It felt like the Twilight Zone with him. Ooh, there's a crossover I didn't expect. The big stories you hear in the media are all about evangelicals getting caught with a spicy worker. It just seems to be more of a carnal thing with them. There's nothing here about that. It's interesting that this rabbi thought that this spicy worker was the only person he could turn to question himself and his faith. Story 25. I once had someone who gave me $250 a week to just talk and smoke lettuce with him. No spicy at all. He was very lonely because his wife passed and just wanted female company. One day he broke down during one of our hangouts saying how much he wished his wife was here. I just let him cry while I held him. Story 26. Probably not the saddest, but the most recent one. Guy gave me $300 every 2 weeks just to text him and treat him nicely. No physical contact, no nudes or spicy texting. Literally just wanted good morning and good night texts, and someone to encourage him as far as work and his hobbies went. Story 27. In my younger days, I worked at a male review. I had this woman of about 40 who would come in fairly regularly. She asked me to a dinner date. I obliged her request, and she was quite attractive. About 5 minutes in, she started bawling, and when I asked what's the matter, she told me I was an exact replica of her son, whom she lost to cancer. She proceeded to show me pictures, and the resemblance was uncanny. We chatted over the years since, but in 2018, she passed away from cancer. R.I.P. Yeah, that one took a turn. With all the step corn that's on the spicy sites these days, this one threw me for a loop. And she came in for quite a while before breaking down and making this confession. At the very last minute, for some reason, she couldn't go through with it. Oh, rest in peace to both of them. Story 28. I'm a guy who shoots corn, so technically a spicy worker. I've got some requests from CornPub users who sent me some messages. One guy just wanted me to shoot a girl who would say, "Hi, John." I changed the name. "I love you, John." "I miss you, John," and so on. I guess this guy has nobody who talks to him. Story 29. Not one in particular, but I have had a few clients who were severely disabled, like in the way that they were paralyzed and required mechanical ventilation. It makes me super frustrated and sad for these gents because they still need a physical touch that isn't a medical necessity. They still have desires and wants, but they're literally trapped because they can't go anywhere on their own. And because of the stigma of spicy work, they don't think their family would allow an FSSW to visit. Story 30. My wife is a dancer, and the saddest story she told me was about a Syrian, I think, refugee. He'd been in America for 2 years waiting on paperwork for his family to follow him and immigrate. He felt really guilty for being there, but was really lonely and just wanted a hug or to be held for human contact. Told her about his family the whole time. Oh, I can't believe that this guy thought that that was the only way he could have any kind of contact with someone. Did he have no family or friend support? Did he have no one that he could have some sort of level of intimacy with? I can't imagine that I could be that lonely. Story 31. I could go on for days. Can't tell you how many men I've seen on the brink of devastation who just needed a listening ear and a warm touch. People are fragile creatures. Edit. My first award. Story 32. The first client I ever saw asked me to spit in his mouth and tell him I loved him. And he took out a photo album and we looked at pictures of his dad's youth. That one is a little sad, but that one just took a left turn that was actually kind of amusing. Not at the man's expense. I can imagine he has needs, but just that left turn from that sort of humiliation type of abuse to reminiscing about his dad. That is weird. I mean, I'm glad the guy knows what he wants, but that's just weird. Story 33. This is such a sadly beautiful thread. Thanks for the question, and to all those who shared the stories. Really brought a tear to my eye. Story 34. I'm starting to get an impression that spicy work is closer to therapy than wicked kitty just spicy truth. It's possible to build a reputation and clientele on spicy skills alone, but your ability to make clients feel comfortable and valued is way more important. Story 35. Just hold me, please. Silent tears ensued. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.